What if you remember something most clearly? Never actually happened in life? You were there. You heard the words. You felt the sting. And yet, someone looked you in the eyes and told you it was all in your head. Disturbingly, you started to believe them. Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because something inside your brain, something ancient, was hijacked. Gaslighting is not merely manipulation. It is neurological sabotage, a deliberate attack on the architecture of your memory. And the worst part? Your brain is wired to cooperate with the attack. This is not a video about toxic people, but what happens inside you, the chemistry, the structures, the invisible war between what you know and what you've been trained to forget. By the end of this, you will understand exactly how memory gets rewritten and why your brain, under certain conditions, lets it happen. But first, we need to go somewhere uncomfortable, the place where trust and fear meet. Memory is not a recording. Your brain does not store events like a camera. It reconstructs them every single time you remember. In 2014, neuroscientist Donna Bridge demonstrated this phenomenon in study at Northwestern University. Participants were shown objects on a screen, then asked to recall their locations. Remarkably, their memories shifted. Each time they remembered, the brain updated the original file. The act of remembering changes the memory itself. This is called memory reconstruction. And it matters because if someone interrupts you during recall, if they insert doubt at the exact moment you're reconstructing, they are not only challenging your story, they are editing it. Psychologists call this the misinformation effect. Elizabeth Loftus proved it in her landmark study on eyewitness testimony. When she changed a single word in a question from hit to smashed, witnesses remembered broken glass. There was no broken glass. One word, planted at the right moment, and the brain filled in details that never existed. Now, imagine this happening not in a lab, but in your kitchen, your bedroom, your own head. Strangely, the people closest to you have the most access. They know when you're tired, they know when you're stressed, they know exactly when your defenses drop, and they know how to insert the question that rewrites the file. Are you sure that's what I said? That's not how I remember it. I think you're misremembering again. These are not innocent corrections. These are surgical strikes on your certainty. How many times have you apologized for something you knew was not your fault? Because once you doubt the memory, you start doubting the self that holds it. And here, the next structure enters the picture. A part of your brain designed to keep you safe, but easily turned against you. Deep inside your temporal lobe sits the amygdala, two almond-shaped clusters, your threat detection center. Critically, the amygdala does not think, it reacts. When danger appears, it fires before your prefrontal cortex can analyze. This is why you flinch before you understand why. Joseph Ledoux at NYU mapped this pathway in the 1990s. He called it the low road, a shortcut that bypasses conscious thought. The high road takes time. Logic, reason. The low road is instant, emotional, survival, and here is the trap. When someone gaslights you repeatedly, your amygdala learns something dangerous. It learns that contradicting them feels like a threat. Not because you're weak, but because the brain cannot tell the difference between social rejection and physical danger. Naomi Eisenberger's research at UCLA showed this using fMRI scans. Social exclusion activates the same neural regions as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex lights up. The brain reads rejection as injury. Interestingly, gaslighters exploit this without knowing the science. They pair every contradiction with withdrawal, silence, coldness, the threat of abandonment. So your amygdala does the math. Challenge them, pain follows. Agree with them, safety returns. Over time, you stop trusting your own perception, not because you were convinced, but because disagreement became neurologically expensive. Your brain chose peace over truth. Here is the paradox. The smarter you are, the more reasons you can find to doubt yourself. Intelligence becomes the weapon they use against you. Have you ever backed down from something you knew was true, just to end the tension? That was not weakness. That was your amygdala doing its job, protecting you from the wrong threat. But there is a deeper layer still, a reason why some people are more sensitive than others. And it has no connection with intelligence. It connects with something far more intimate, something formed before you could speak a single word. Before you could speak, you were learning. Not facts, not language, but attachment. Psychiatrist John Bowlby first mapped this in his 1969 work, Our Attachment and Loss. He discovered that infants form survival bonds in the first 18 months. These bonds become blueprints, templates for every relationship that follows. Critically, Bowlby identified different attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, disorganized. Mary Ainsworth expanded this through her strange situation experiments. She observed how toddlers reacted when separated from caregivers. Some children protested. Some withdrew. Some froze, unable to decide between seeking comfort and fearing it. That freeze response, that is disorganized attachment, and it creates a neurological contradiction that lasts decades. The same person becomes both the source of safety and the source of fear. The brain cannot resolve this, so it learns to doubt itself instead. Disturbingly, this is the exact internal state gaslighting recreates. The gaslighter becomes both refuge and threat. You need them. You fear them. You cannot leave. You cannot stay. And in that paralysis, their version of reality wins. Neuroscientist Alan Shore documented this in Affect Regulation and the Origin of the Self. Early relational trauma shapes the right hemisphere of the brain, the hemisphere responsible for emotional regulation, for reading social cues, for knowing when something feels wrong. If this hemisphere was shaped by unpredictability, your inner alarm speaks a language you were taught not to trust. You feel something is wrong, but you have no permission to believe it. This is why intelligent people get gaslit. This is why educated people stay confused. The wound is not intellectual, it is pre-verbal, stored in the body before the mind had words. Picture this. You are sitting across from someone, they say something cruel. Your stomach drops, your chest tightens, your body knows, but your mind says, maybe I misunderstood. That gap between body and mind is where they live. Interestingly, this explains a phenomenon that confuses everyone on the outside. Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you see it? Because the part of you that needed to see it was built in a house where seeing clearly was dangerous. But no one tells you. The brain that learned this can unlearn it too. Behind your forehead sits the prefrontal cortex, the newest part of the human brain. It does not react. It reflects thoughts. Logic lives here. Planning, self-awareness, the ability to question your own thoughts. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio explored this in Descartes' error. He showed that without the prefrontal cortex, humans cannot make decisions. Emotion and logic are not opposites, they are partners. But here is the problem. Under chronic stress, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. Cortisol, the stress hormone, floods the brain. The amygdala takes over. The thinking brain surrenders to the reacting brain. Remarkably, this is by design. When a lion is chasing you, you do not need to philosophize. You need to run. But gaslighting is not a lion. It is a slow poison, and your brain cannot tell the difference. Each contradiction releases a small spike of cortisol. Each denial triggers a micro-stress response. Over weeks, months, years, the prefrontal cortex becomes chronically suppressed. You lose access to your own judgment. Let me ask you something. Not as a study, not as science, as a human. When was the last time you felt truly clear, truly certain, truly yourself? Remember that feeling. Hold on to it, because that is the you they tried to bury. Have you ever felt sharper, clearer, more like yourself when you were away from a certain person? That was not imagination. That was your prefrontal cortex coming back online. Critically, this is reversible. Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison showed that mindfulness practices increase prefrontal cortex density. Just 8 weeks of consistent practice. The brain is plastic. It was shaped by the gaslighting. It can be reshaped by you. But recovery is not just about meditation apps and breathing exercises. It requires something more confrontational. You have to stop asking, "Am I crazy?" and start asking a different question. A question that changes the entire game. One that puts the lens where it always belonged. On them, not on you. There is one question that cuts through every gaslighting tactic. It is not what really happened that leads you into the trap. The question is this: why do I always leave this conversation feeling worse about myself? Remarkably, this reframes everything. You stop auditing the facts. You start auditing the dots and patterns, because gaslighting leaves fingerprints, not in what was said, but in how you feel afterward. Confusion, frustration, the strange sensation of having lost without knowing what the fight was about. Psychologist Robin Stern documented this in The Gaslight Effect. She identified 3 stages of gaslighting response: disbelief, defense, depression. First, you cannot believe they would do this. Then, you argue endlessly to prove your reality. Finally, you give up. And in that giving up, they win. But you are watching this video, which means you did not fully give up. Something inside you still knows. Interestingly, Carl Jung wrote about this in The Undiscovered Self. He called it the inner voice, the part of the psyche that resists external domination. It can be muted, it can be suppressed, it cannot be killed. What would happen if you trusted that voice? Not forever, just once, just to see what it knows. Fascinatingly, the path forward is not about winning arguments, but disengaging from them entirely. Gaslighters need your participation. They need you to defend, explain, prove. The moment you stop playing, the game collapses. You do not need to convince them you were right. You need to convince yourself that you do not need their agreement. This is the reclamation. Your memory is yours. Your perception is yours. Your nervous system, once you understand it, is yours again. Critically, the science proves what you always suspected. You were not crazy, you were targeted. The very fact that you questioned yourself so deeply is evidence of a healthy mind under attack. Only someone with conscience doubts themselves. The gaslighter never does. You were never the problem. You were the solution they tried to suppress. And now you see the mechanism. Now the fog lifts. Now you walk forward. Not with revenge, not with rage, with clarity. There are more patterns hidden in plain sight, more mechanisms running beneath every conversation you've ever had. The deeper you look, the more you find.